Hello and good evening. It's Dave again, speaking for Better Than Before, all things mindful, communicative, and relationship oriented. Today, I thought I would talk a little bit about mindfulness. Um, I have been in some conversations where I felt like mindfulness and the idea of mindful communication got a bad bad interpretation or a misunderstanding that I'd like to clear up. And that is that because mindfulness requires us to be aware of our emotions and understand them and decide how we're going to operate on them, it eliminates spontaneity and that we become kind of mindfulness robots that are not capable of feeling. Um, well, just as an example, I'd like to point out the Dalai Lama, whose whole life is dedicated to mindfulness and mindfulness meditation and being aware of his thoughts and emotions. And he's a man with a great spontaneous presence and a great spontaneous joy. No, we don't see him losing his temper, at least not in public. I sort of have the feeling that he never does, but you can't know. You can't know the secret lives of other people. But, there's a man who has not used mindfulness to suppress emotion. Mindfulness is not about repression or becoming so tightly controlled that you can't feel anything. It's about feeling everything, but understanding where those feelings come from and having a good relationship with those feelings, not letting those feelings blow us all over the place like leaves in a hurricane. The idea of being mindful is to be aware of our feelings and to use them wisely. Anger per se, we will not judge as being a good or a bad emotion, but sometimes the way we do anger, the way we act out anger is extremely destructive. There can be no real doubt about that. We scream, we carry on, we threaten, we're aggressive, and we really ignore the rights of other people in our presence. We may even ignore the safety of other people in our presence when we get very, very angry. That isn't the anger itself. That's the way we're choosing to express it. That's a choice. That's a decision. If we choose not to behave like lunatics, that's not repression. That's deciding that, yes, we feel very angry, but the way we're going to deal with it is a way that's going to have a real impact. Because when we lose it and behave like maniacs, nobody respects us and people stay away from us and people say, oh, he's very difficult to work with and, I don't want to be near him. And you just wind up losing your connections and losing your reputation and becoming someone that you don't want to be and you don't want to be in relation to other people. It just doesn't serve its purpose. And your anger, instead of defending your rights, which is really your goal, or defending your limits, becomes something destructive to you. So we can choose wisely. By being mindful, we don't just shut off the anger tap and hold it in and become so repressed that we have heart attacks. The idea of mindfully using our anger is to be aware that we feel that some limit has been crossed that is unacceptable to us, and we say this in an assertive way that makes it clear that we have our limits, those limits have been crossed, and we want different treatment, and we want a different outcome. And we can envision a better situation where we are treated more correctly. It's not losing touch with our anger, and it's not repressing or holding it in. It's letting it out, but it's letting it out in a way that works instead of the way that it normally comes out, which totally doesn't work. The same can be true of any emotion. There's nothing wrong with feeling love and being mindful at the same time. Knowing where that love comes from and why it's in our hearts makes it easier to express that love in a way that someone else can understand. in a way that someone else can understand how we feel about them and what place they hold in our lives. Sure, it's, yes, spontaneity is nice. Mindfulness doesn't make spontaneity impossible. It changes its shape. As we practice mindfulness over time, we can be spontaneous because we know that what's going to come out is something worthwhile. That we've put our wise mind in charge, that we practice self-control, that our emotions just don't come spilling out of us like water over a dam. Our emotions come from within us, and we know them. And they're part of us, but they're not all of us. And we can offer this to someone else in a way that matters, instead of a way that just comes exploding out of us without any concern for what impact it has on someone else. It's not only anger that can be destructive that way. When love comes exploding out of us that way, if the other person is not ready for it, it can be very destructive. It can break the connection instead of reinforcing it. So when I speak of mindfulness, again, it's not about losing our spontaneity or losing our feeling. Instead, it's getting in touch with those feelings and expressing them in constructive ways. So I just wanted to make that point clear, and we'll be back to talking about mindful connection and mindful communication in relation tomorrow. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.